Hello and Happy New Year everyone. Let's start the year with a quick channel update. I've made the executive decision to axe the Age of Prophecy and just stop with the whole Age of whatever shtick in general. The Age of Mage was fun and all, but it really had more to do with my general reaction to Elden Ring's combat systems. It overall just had more juice, and I felt like I actually had something to say with it. The Age of Prophecy was going to be a fun series of theme builds around the concept of death in the lands between, but ultimately I just don't have the same kind of things to say about the game like I did with the previous Age. Plus, after the whole Thrustmaster leak implying that we'll see the DLC announced or even released in the next month or two, I don't think I have the time to make videos on all of the builds I had planned. I should also mention that while I had quite a few fun ideas for death-themed builds for the Age of Prophecy, the idea of making every build death-related quickly became a total chore, and I ended up having a lot more fun with the non-themed builds I was creating on the side, more than the ones I was cooking up for the Age of Prophecy. In general, I feel like I haven't really had the time to make videos like I used to, and to be quite honest with you, I even toyed with shutting down the channel entirely in the last several months. Basically, every time I would sit down to write a script or edit a video, I just got this feeling that I was just doing more things that felt like work in my very limited amount of free time, instead of just playing the game I actually wanted to play. Someday I probably will shut down the channel, but I don't think I'll announce it or anything. I think I'll just stop uploading videos one day and never upload a new one. And before all you doomers start, my lack of enthusiasm for making videos really stems from a lack of time and prioritizing more important things like my family and my career. And Elden Ring's quality as a multiplayer game really has no bearing on my desire to make videos. In fact, I'd really prefer to be playing Elden Ring right now instead of making this video. This was actually the fourth or fifth time I sat down to write this script, but instead booted up Elden Ring and did like 2 to 3 hours of Invasions. So, like I said, I'm not done making videos at this point. In order to maintain my enthusiasm for making videos, I can't just self-impose these video constraints like the Age of Prophecy was supposed to be, that also have a deadline on them. Otherwise, I'm just creating what feels like work for myself. And besides, a while ago I reached a point where I felt very comfortable with the size of my channel and the type of audience that I attract, and I don't really feel the need to expand any further. So at the very least, the pressure of being more consistent with my videos in order to appease the algorithm to continue to grow the channel no longer really affects me. I think what I'd like to do moving forward is shorter videos with no narration, just some cool invasion clips with a central theme, with maybe some music in the background. I'd like to be able to put that kind of content out a lot more, rather than these fully voiced 30-minute videos I keep making. And that's not to say I will stop making these voiced and narrated videos. I would just like to have some more videos in between, I guess. And that's another thing, I gotta keep the video length down. This is getting absurd. The last 4 videos of mine have been like 25 or 30 minutes or longer, and my goal for most videos is like 15 minutes. 15 minutes is a very nice, digestible amount of time to spend with me, and also a fairly smooth and expedient video editing process. So if this video goes over 25 minutes, I swear to God I'm gonna drink several gallons of shower water tonight. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to give my update here. Maybe a few more videos on the horizon. Not less voice videos, just more videos in between, hopefully. Now, on to the real reason this video is being made in the first place. So in the next several months, you'll still see likely a lot of the builds that I had planned throughout the Age of Prophecy, one of which is this build. This little gremlin is Lot the Vulgar, a loyal soldier of said Vulgar Militia. He is a master of battlefield tactics, not in the way that Sun Tzu wrote about in his ancient text that edgy teens and alt-right weirdos quote on the internet. No, Lot is a tactical genius in that he values shenanigans that would poke and prod his opponents in obnoxious ways until they do something overwhelmingly stupid and ill-advised. And one of you edgy teens might leave a comment saying something along the lines of, actually, that's exactly what Sun Tzu says to do in The Art of War, to which I would say, holy shit, shut the fuck up, nerd, go outside and talk to a woman. And you might say, well, what if I'm not attracted to women, like some sort of obnoxious brat that everybody hates? To which I'd say, it's healthy in general to talk to people of the opposite gender. And believe me, I've seen the statistics from my YouTube page, and I know that 95% of you little shits out there are dudes under 30. Alright, I'm starting to see why my videos keep going over 25 minutes in length. Let's get back to the build. This is a very basic strength faith build, but with some thematic goals and limitations. When making this build, I chose to give myself just enough faith to cast Black Flame Blade, and then dumped all of my other damage points into strength. Why Black Flame Blade? Well, the Vulgar Militia have this one attack where they channel Destined Death into their blades for a few seconds, and while there are very few weapons that have that same visual effect, Black Flame Blade is the closest I can get in both form and function. Thus, all of my weapons are heavy infused so I can buff them with Black Flame Blade when I can. The buff isn't particularly powerful at this level, and it doesn't last particularly long either, but that really doesn't matter that much that I'm not being as efficient as possible because invasions at rune level 40 aren't really all that hard. Another thing that you'll notice about the Vulgar Militia is that pretty much all of their weapons are just repurposed tools and farming equipment. Just take a look at the Vulgar Militia saw and shuttle. They're just saws and hand scythes, essentially just farm equipment, attached to long sticks, because unlike other factions and actual armies in Elden Ring, I get the sense that the Vulgar Militia were just scavengers and laborers that have subsequently been called upon to become these eternal watchers of the battlefield. The Vulgar Militia also tend to use Beast Claw, and I use that to justify myself using all the other beast incantations, although I kinda only end up using Stone of Garank with any sort of frequency. I should use Beast Claw more often. It does not great damage, but it does roll catch people pretty well. But back to the weapons. Since the Vulgar Militia seem to use these repurposed tools as their weapons, I've taken that same approach to all weapons in this Vulgar arsenal. This forked greatsword, why, it's just a large pitchfork used to shovel hay, probably. It's also particularly deadly when buffed with Black Flame Blade and used to blender people with this absurd hyper armor on Wild Strikes, and then stacked on top of the innate bleed of the forked greatsword. I was gonna say you'd be surprised how many people just stand there and try to swing directly out of hit stun, but if you've played Elden Ring for as long as we've been playing it, you know that people absolutely will just continuously press R1 and keep trying to swing out of hit stun. So Wild Strikes is a good counter to this. Alright, so this halberd, it's just a large saw, something that farmers might use to chop wood with. It also has Spinning Slash slapped on it, as well as innate bleed, so it goes from the usual halberd levels of ridiculously good to I've had enough of this 3v1 kind of good. Like with the forked greatsword, a lot of these weapons have innate bleed with them, which will proc often enough that it feels not dramatically different than playing with bleed infused weapons at this level. And no, Saint Riot, weapons with innate bleed have zero innate scaling with arcane, unless of course you occult infuse them. That is just not something that has ever happened in any of these games. Alright, moving on. This iron cleaver. My friend, it's right there in the name, it is but a simple cooking utensil. I also put Spinning Slash on this as well, since axes in this game are just kind of bad in every way. So why not give it a 3-hit true combo? The Iron Cleaver also has that really good standing R2 that kind of chases down your opponents. So what I like to do a lot of the time is hit that first L1 to stun my opponent, and as they try to roll away, I chase them down with the standing R2. You would be surprised how often that works. And what about this other halberd in my inventory here? Well, it's also just a farming tool on a stick. Please ignore that it's infused with flame art and has flaming strike. It's my find out weapon for overleveled phantoms to find out that they too are extremely mortal at this level range. But what about the third halberd in my inventory? This is clearly a halberd, right? Well, I see where you can make that mistake, but truly this is just a big flagpole that I picked up. Now, I'm very annoyed with two things about this weapon. One, that I cannot buff this flagpole with Black Flame Blade, and two, that the buff the Ash of War provides in PvP is a measly 2% damage boost and a 2.5% damage negation. But the real benefit to this weapon comes when you use it to buff PvE, whose damage and damage negation is buffed by 20% across the board. So, when we invade that hallway of scholarly death in Riot Lucaria, buffing the wizards and pot warrior makes an already difficult stretch of PvE into a complete nightmare. And what about this hand axe? Well, it's literally just a hand axe. Is there something special about me using offhand axes on this channel? Well, I cannot recall. The hand axe chops wood just as well as it chops my opponents, and is best paired with a main hand halberd or spear. Now this scythe. Yeah, it's a scythe. It's farming equipment. That is the point. The other day, during a Taunter's Tongue run, old Pure Platinum Prin kicked my ass up and down Volcano Manor with spinning strikes on a regular scythe, not one of those tacky grave scythes. The regular scythe seems quite a bit longer than all of the other scythes of the class, but in fact is only just a tiny bit longer than the grave scythe, which is fine by me. I find that the illusion of a greater advantage leads to more stylish and confident play on my end, even if said advantage is just, in fact, quite small. And what about the straight sword I'm using here? Surely that is a real weapon. Well, not really. It's really just a piece of scrap metal that they attach to the legs of weaponized fowl. It's really just a scavenged blade that's been refurbished into a straight sword. I've been watching quite a lot of Decker Dangers streams as of late on Twitch, and one thing I've noticed, and that he talks about quite frequently, is this extremely silly technique where he performs a running R2 and then immediately parries after that running R2. And initially I saw him do it a couple times and I was like, why is he parrying after that? And then he started to land it, and he kept landing it, and then I started to do it, and then I just kept landing it over and over again, and it's because people just mash right out of hit stun. Like, they get hit and they're like, I gotta counter attack, and you just parry that stupid monkey-brained R1 right out of getting hit. Yet another example of just like how silly hit stun and hit stun priority is in this game. And lastly, the jar cannon. Everybody uses the jar cannon, but I feel especially justified in using it because it's literally a jar that's been repurposed into a cannon, hence the name. What greater weapon for a repurposed armory than the jar cannon? But the jar cannon leads me into my next section, which is all about the battle tactics of the Vulgar Militia. Think about where and how you encounter the Vulgar Militia throughout the lands between. It's always in these sneaky little ambushes, with those little gremlins hopping out of bushes with a cackle, or throwing smoke bombs before landing a grab attack on you, or just setting up these poison traps for you to walk over. And in the spirit of my fellow militia members, I've devoted this build to those same kind of cackle-inducing ambushes and guerrilla tactics. Sometimes those tactics are just as simple as repositioning for the easiest jar cannon shot of all time. Other times, it's picking the perfect vantage point for said jar cannon shot. Okay, actually, a lot of the time, it's picking good angles for jar cannon shots, but you already know what that's like because you too have invaded in the game Elden Ring. Where the real tactics and ambushes need to come through are against parties with wildly overleveled summons. Here, I hid in a bush for about 5 minutes to wait out the host and his overleveled friend to go do something else than sit around the bonfire. The summon makes the unfortunate mistake of going off by himself to play the level for the host, and ends up getting chased down with the old find out fire shuttle. As comeuppance for their laziness, the host gets kicked off a cliff. Or in this instance, it's a fat rolling Kevin being carried by 2 overleveled mage summons, which, as you all know, it's kind of just a nightmare to deal with 2 overleveled mages at the same time. And I know it would be way too difficult to actually chase down one of these summons without getting hit by some projectile being hurled at me from beyond my field of vision, so I instead lure everyone to the blue lightning balls of death and let nature take its course. And in the rematch of the same invasion, they're now in a total dead zone of PvE support. So I lure them to the jungles of Vietnam, Northern Schiefer River, by taking pot shots and then disappearing into the bushes. The whole time, I'm waiting for this fat-rolling host to wander into the range of the Viet Cong snipers, ancestral follower archers. And when they finally do, it's time for my very own Vulgar Militia moment. I find a lot of the dramatically overleveled summons I encounter are for some reason helping their hosts kill Grail, which is definitely not a two-man job. But now it seems that Fort Faroth has become my personal fortress against overleveled summons. And thematically, I do find it very fitting that this is also the location where you find Radagon's Source Seal. But the whole breakdown of the fort is very defendable. You have a nice angle to take jar cannon shots at your opponents from the ramparts on top. The foyer is filled with poison-spewing bats, which also doubles as an alarm system that then allows you to track your poisoned opponents when you yourself cannot see them. Then you have the ladder up to the top of the fort, which is in itself an excellent choke point. And then finally, on top of the fort, the ghostly soldiers are no joke either. I think because Fort Faroth is technically considered an endgame area, the soldiers who are summoned here are actually a bit beefy and do very real damage to absolutely everybody, especially overleveled summons. So yeah, I love Fort Faroth invasions. In fact, I tend to win a lot of these invasions here precisely because of just how defendable this fort is. Very well built fort, 10 out of 10, thank you very much From Software. Well, that's all I really had to say about this build. It's pretty fun and semi-honest for rune level 40, so which means I can constantly feel morally superior to everybody I fight. Could you make this more efficient by dropping the faith investment entirely and cold infusing everything? Absolutely, but then I lose out on my Vulgar Militia aesthetic, which has been maybe my favorite gremlin cosplay I've done in any of these games thus far. I will leave you with several clips of me kicking the ass of weebs, which, as you all know, I absolutely despise, right next to Boil Prawn Shack duelists. But that's it from me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.